Welcome to Unit Design 101, where we break down the overall factors that make units useful in Fire Emblem and beyond. Whether you're a romhack creator or merely interested in overall design, this resource is for you. This week, we're taking a heavy swing at the third corner of the weapon triangle and tackling fighters, brigands, and pirates of all stripes, how they texturize the early game, and the way they transition into the mid and late game. Fighters are known for having high hit points and doing big damage with every unreliable hit. High strength and low skill are often involved, but sometimes it's just the high base damage and low base accuracy of axes that inform upon the fighter. Indeed, the axe fighter's stat line doubles down upon the features of their chosen weapon, much like a myrmidon's speed or skill, or a knight's balance of strength and skill, reinforce the sword and lance corners of the weapon triangle respectively. Speed is usually higher for pirates and brigands than it is for fighters, who often have the slightly higher defense instead, but these differences do vary between games. The larger difference is terrain accessibility, with pirates able to walk slowly on sea and ocean tiles, and brigands able to march through peaks. Water walking is often more useful for taking shortcuts across maps or getting to otherwise inaccessible areas, while cliff walking provides some of the strongest defensive terrain in most games that it appears in. Ultimately, both of these abilities depend on the map to be useful, as locations such as the landlocked interiors of caves or buildings will generally have no terrain to take advantage of. But maps that do have these features can provide a very large advantage for units that are able to make use of them. It's nowhere near as free travel as flying, but it is still more niche mobility than most other unit types. Fighters in the early game suffer from low accuracy and defense, which are compounded by the weapon triangle disadvantage, making them prime targets for sword lords or early myrmidons or even thieves to take down with little danger. Allied axe fighters are often unreliable at this stage, being capable of big hits on even bulky enemies like armor knights, in ways that only your early pre-promote might be able to mirror, but with a level of inconsistency that makes every single point of accuracy lost to terrain feel even more impactful. This inconsistent early game can mirror itself in the late game gambler berserker type unit, like Garrett, with a higher crit chance than a hit chance, leading to situations where you either completely destroy your target or leave them entirely unscathed. The relative inconsistency but high power on hit creates a three-way branching path for axe fighters going into the midgame, all of which can be seen in their original showing of FE1. Many axe fighters will simply fail to get enough level ups to keep up, often because they fail to get kills because of their inaccuracy, or because players deliberately avoid using them, and will get left behind. Even if not intentionally designed this way, games which give multiple axe fighters all at once often have at least some who suffer this fate. FE1's Daros, with his abysmal growths despite his unique water walking, usually follows this path. This intentional disposability of axe fighters might also explain everyone's favorite weapon, the Devil Axe. Doubling down on big early hits and the relative expendability of fighters, the Devil Axe creates a niche for axe fighters by being a weapon that players would feel less willing to use if they could on a more long-term growth unit like a Cavalier or a Mercenary. The second path that axe fighters can take is that they serve a solely transitory role in your army, having a use in the early game for damage and bulk, but often failing to keep up even when leveled. Having weapon ranks that let them use effective weaponry like hammers or halberds can be especially potent in the early game, but often lose their value later on as better weapons and more units capable of using said weapons become available. FE1 specifically designed transitive axe fighters into the game, where axes are not sold in shops after the first third of the game, thus putting an effective limit on how much you can use any axe unit unless you stock up ahead of time. These axe fighters will find use early on, and maybe into the mid-game, but will likely not have priority on promotion items or stat boosters, and will eventually fall out of deployment. Board and Cord suit this role very nicely, with some rare one-rounding potential in their join chapter, and the use of hammer for armors, but lacking late-game potential to really keep going. For another example, Engage's Boucheron also fits this role through the use of the game's unit type system, as he is the only backup unit in your army until either getting Anna or Lapis, and chain attacks are always valuable, even if they don't lead to long-term use of the unit performing them. The third likely avenue for axe fighters is that they will just be very good. This might depend on some lucky growths early on, but with modern Fire Emblem limiting the severity of weight and accuracy penalties for axes, and especially for any fighters that get personal weapons, many axe fighters have solid potential, and will only need a bit of help early on to push them there. While their mobility or versatility might be lacking compared to cavalry or flyers, a good long-term axe fighter will have strong hits and decent bulk that last all game long, with a sense of reliability that lesser axe fighters may lack. Despite having limited weapons and no promotion in FE1, Barst manages to find himself as a pretty solid and reliable unit on raw stats and determination alone, and this only gets better in later remakes. Axe fighters will rarely be the absolute best units in your army, at least for more than a few early chapters, but if they are, it is almost certainly through a combination of player and developer favoritism. Bottom line, 1. Embrace the inconsistency. If you're going to have an axe fighter have low accuracy, bump up their damage to compensate. If you have a high risk high reward mechanic, putting it on an axe fighter makes a lot of sense. 2. Reliability is boring but effective. A reliable axe fighter can be a pillar of your early army before your growth units come online, and might even be a good growth target themselves. 3. Accept their nature as temporary units. Most players will use an early axe unit only because there are no better options. This is not inherently a problem, and can in fact be used as a teaching moment for what a player should value, such as Board using effective weaponry, or Boucheron's backup unit status. Thank you for watching this episode of Unit Design 101. If you want to learn more about other units, check out the playlist in the end card. A big shout out to Royal Leguse Guard member Sal Mellon, and special thanks to Leguse Guard members C2 Peekly, Enigmatic Mr. L, The Big Herman 007, Bro Tutorman, NKO Rico, Kumi, Miss Mesmerism, Lacog, and Relaz6 for joining the channel. Your support goes to keeping food on my table and keeping my schedule free enough to make these videos. Until next time, this is Mithril Zenith signing out.